For a Christian, what should we do if a loved one were to be attacked physically or emotionally?
You've written on this, haven't you, Greg?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. But
What did you say?
I went first last time. It's your turn. They always hear me talk about this.
You're the expert on this.
Okay, well, I'm not the expert. There are no experts on this.
I'll tell you.
You know, here's one thing. I recommended this, I think, 2 weeks ago in a message, and that is John Howard Yoder wrote a book on this. John Howard Yoder, it's called What Would You Do? And it's just a little book that just takes a kind of a practical approach to that question, because that's the question everybody always asks. What would you do if a loved one was threatened? Wouldn't you resort to whatever level of violence was necessary to protect them? And he just argues there, not just on the basis of obeying Jesus, but on the basis of kind of common sense. And really, it's a very keen philosophical work, though it's very readable. But shows how resorting to violence may actually, in fact, would most likely increase the likelihood that your loved one would be harmed more than they otherwise would be. And there's been a number of studies that have shown that. As I said a couple weeks ago, although maybe it was in response to a question, I got to stand up because I think better on this one if I'm walking around.
I know you did answer this at our Bethel class. I don't know if that's...
I did, but I also answered it at the Q&A part of a message a couple weeks ago. But here's the shortest thing I'd say about that. It's this. What usually happens is that people take that question, what if a loved one was being attacked, and their common sense tells them that you should resort to any level of violence necessary to protect them. And that it feels immoral not to use whatever violence is necessary to protect them. But then if you should do that for a loved one, then shouldn't you do it for your neighbor, because you're supposed to love your neighbor? But if you should do it for your neighbor, then what about people that you don't even know, people in your state, people in your country? Why shouldn't you kill for your country if you're being threatened? And now we have what's called the just war policy. As long as the violence is justified, you can engage in it. But now notice, as soon as you've gone there, now Jesus' teaching means nothing more than be nice to your person, your grandmother, when she's grouchy at you. You've totally taken the radicalness out of Jesus' teaching. When Jesus gives it, he knows he's being radical. He says, of course, everyone says love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I'm going to tell you love your enemies. And when he says love your enemies, the first thing that any Jewish person in the first century would think about are the Romans, the terrorists who have already won and they've conquered us and often do threaten us and our loved ones. And he's saying to those kind of enemies, the real enemies, the nasty enemies, you need to love them, bless them, do good to them. Turn the other cheek, never use a sword, never exact vengeance, leave all vengeance to God. So the teaching is absolutely radical, and we just have to deal with it. So rather than starting with our common sense assumption that of course we should use whatever violence is necessary, and then talking our way out of obeying Jesus, how about if we start at the other extreme and operate this way? It may be that if someone were to break into my house tonight and threaten my wife, I might, not thinkingly, hit him on the head with a chair and kill him. I hope I wouldn't, but I might. But look, I understand that it would feel, that's our instinct. But maybe if I start by loving my enemies now, since hardly anyone has that actually happen to them. That's a theoretical, right? So how about if we just practice loving our enemies, doing good to our enemies every day? Now, maybe it will grow slowly to the point where maybe in 10 years or 20 years, we'll actually see the morality of Jesus' teaching. And so it won't just be a rule that we're supposed to obey, but rather it will come out of our character. Because when you get attacked or a loved one gets attacked, no one says, hey, wait a second, I got to get my rule book out. What am I supposed to do here? Oh, yeah, that's right. No, you operate out of your character, right? And your character is formed with every decision you make. So what I encourage people to do is, we could fight over the theoretical, situation all we want. But why not start practicing now the kingdom ethic of Jesus? And pick out your worst enemies every day and pray for them and bless them. And if there are some enemies that you come across in your day-to-day life, think of what wonderful things you can do to make their life better, what cards you can give them, how can you put a smile on their face. And by practicing that, I've been doing this for about 6 years, and I'm slowly finding that you actually begin to change. So that now, when someone breaks into your house, maybe this will be true in 10 years, I don't know, but if they break into the house, my gut, I will actually love them. I won't just be saying, oh gosh, I ought to love them. Dang, I can't kill them. Oh, I wish I could. No, when they break in, now you actually love them. Your character's been formed in Jesus' direction. So it's like if my son were to break in and try to kill my wife, I would respond differently if my son were to try to kill my wife than a person I didn't know. But if I had the character of Jesus, I'd love the person I didn't know as much as I love my son. And see, if my son were to break in and going to threaten my wife, I would immediately go, not for the gun, though I don't own a gun and never will, but not for somebody to kill him with. I would immediately go, what are my options here? I would be thinking of ways I can prevent this without harming him, and even if it would mean harming me. And see, that's the wisdom that I think obedience to Christ can bring us. When we are addicted to violence, and we are in this fallen world, it makes us uncreative. We lose our options. We don't see the million things between doing nothing and killing that are available to us. When we are living in love, however, it opens up a world of options. You see things you otherwise couldn't see. And sometimes even if you're living in that kind of obedience to Jesus, it may be that God could give you insight that you otherwise wouldn't have if you're just operating out of your own self-protectionism. Like a young lady that I knew of who was attacked, and just as the guy was about to rape her with a knife to her throat, she all of a sudden spit out, "Your mother forgives you," which totally neutralized the guy and let her get away free. And turned out, he got arrested, and turned out that he had done some heinous thing to his mother, which, see, God knew exactly what words it would take to neutralize him. But if you're just going for the gun out of your instinct, then your heart's not open to obeying Jesus. So I think how you pose the question is all important. I would do everything you could to prevent that violence, whether it's verbal or physical. I just would do it within the parameters of obeying Jesus. And there's gray area there. I mean, I would feel okay restraining somebody. I just wouldn't act in ways that could potentially kill them. But I would restrain them or get in their way or do anything to prevent that from happening.
Anything to add, Paul?
Paul?
Amen.
Amen.